the way we start all of this is a little bit about Green Hudson and then a little bit about